She was already halfway out the restaurant door when his hand caught her wrist. Not hard, just enough. "You called my tie a funeral decoration," he said quietly. "And I haven't stopped thinking about you for 6 days." Mia turned slowly. This was not supposed to happen. Before we get into this story, like, subscribe, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Every person who stays with this story proves that real connection still matters. Don't let Mia and Junho go through this alone. The alarm went off at 5:47 a.m., 13 minutes before it was supposed to, because that was just the kind of day Chicago had decided to give Mia Collins. She slapped it off without opening her eyes, lying flat on her back in her one-bedroom apartment on the north side, staring at the water stain on the ceiling she'd named Gerald. Gerald had been there since February. Gerald was the most stable relationship in her life. "Morning, Gerald," she muttered, then swung her legs over the side of the bed. The apartment was small but deliberate. Plants on the windowsill, a row of nursing textbooks stacked beside self-help books she'd bought and never opened, a half-drunk mug of tea from the night before sitting on the kitchen counter like a quiet accusation. Mia was 29, a registered nurse at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, and she had exactly 1 day off this week. Today. She had plans for today. Laundry. Groceries. Maybe a walk along the lakefront if her knees cooperated after a double shift. Maybe, she'd finally call her mother back. What she did not have planned was a blind date. She found out about it at 8:15 a.m. when her Aunt Patrice called, voice bright and completely unrepentant. "I signed you up for something," Patrice said, skipping hello entirely. Mia poured coffee. "Define something." "A lunch. At Oriole. 1 o'clock. Oriole was a 2-Michelin-star restaurant downtown. Mia had walked past it once and kept walking because the menu was posted outside in a font that cost money just to look at. Aunt Patrice. "His name is Junho. He's Korean, he's very successful, and Sandra Kim from my church group says he's been looking to meet someone genuine. I showed him your photo." "You what?" "The nice one from Keisha's wedding. You looked soft in it." "I looked soft," Mia repeated flatly. "Mia baby, you are 30. 29. And you haven't been on a date since Derek, and Derek was a mistake we do not speak of anymore." Mia set her coffee down. Derek. 2 years ago. She'd given him a key to her apartment, told him she loved him, and 2 weeks later found out he'd been telling his friends she was just someone he was seeing. That was the last time Mia Collins had let anyone see her coming. Since then, soft had become a liability. She'd replaced it with sharp edges and a talent for ending conversations before they got dangerous. "I'm not going," she said. "You're going." "I'm really not. I already confirmed." The call ended. Mia stared at her phone. Then at Gerald. Gerald offered nothing. 41 floors above the city, in a corner office at Kong Capital Chicago headquarters, Junho Kong was already in his second meeting of the morning and already tired of everyone in the room. Not visibly. Visibly, he was exactly what he trained himself to be: composed, precise, unreadable. He sat at the head of the glass table in a charcoal suit that had been tailored in Seoul, reviewing acquisition projections while his team talked in overlapping voices that had long since blurred into background noise. "Mr. Kong, the Meridian deal. Push it to Thursday." He turned a page. "The liability clause needs renegotiation." "Of course. And for the Westfield portfolio." "Already decided. Move on." His assistant, David, caught his eye from across the room and subtly tapped his watch. Junho gave the smallest nod. He knew what the watch tap meant. The lunch arrangement his mother had somehow coordinated from Seoul, routing it through a Chicago church contact, and landing it on his calendar under the description networking, personal. His mother had been attempting to solve what she called the Junho problem for 3 years. The Junho problem was that he was 34, exceptionally wealthy, and showed no interest in building a personal life. She wasn't wrong that the interest was absent. What she didn't understand was that it wasn't loneliness, it was efficiency. Emotional entanglements were, in his experience, expensive in ways that had nothing to do with money. He'd agreed to the lunch the way he agreed to most things his mother orchestrated, quickly, cleanly, with the intention of fulfilling the obligation and moving on. He would sit through one meal. He would be polite and thorough, and whatever woman arrived would leave with a pleasant enough impression and nothing more. He'd done this 4 times before. He was very good at it. What he was not prepared for was Mia Collins walking into Oriole at 1:03 p.m. in her good jeans and a blazer that said "I made an effort but don't read into it," sitting down across from him with the energy of someone actively calculating an exit strategy. He noticed it immediately, not the jeans, not the blazer. The eyes. She looked at him the way no one in a professional context ever looked at him, like she was already unimpressed and wanted him to know it was nothing personal. He found it, against all reason, slightly fascinating. "You're Jun-ho," she said. Not a question. More like a diagnosis. "I am." He offered his hand. She shook it, brief, businesslike. "Mia, I want to be upfront with you. I didn't choose to be here. My aunt is a force of nature, and I've learned it's easier to show up and explain in person than to cancel." She picked up the water menu, there was a water menu, and set it back down. "So, how do you want to handle this?" Jun-ho looked at her for a moment. In 4 previous blind dates, no one had ever opened with that. "Handle it," he repeated slowly. "We can eat, be polite, agree it's not a fit, and both go home. Or we can skip straight to that last part. Either works for me." She glanced toward the breadbasket. "Though if we're staying, I'm eating the bread." Something shifted in Jun-ho's expression, not a smile. Something quieter than a smile. A flicker, quickly contained. "By all means," he said, and gestured toward the bread. And somehow, neither of them left. The bread was sourdough. Warm. Served with whipped butter that had been salted exactly right, and Mia ate it with a focused appreciation of someone who hadn't had a real meal since yesterday's vending machine granola bar between shifts. Jun-ho watched her for exactly 2 seconds before looking back at his menu. The restaurant hummed around them. Quiet, curated. The kind of place where conversations happened in low registers and no one's silverware ever accidentally clinked. Mia felt the formality of it like a wool sweater in July. She'd worn her blazer as armor, but the room was already winning. She decided to escalate. "Can I ask you something honestly?" she said, setting down her bread. He looked up. "You've been honest since you sat down. I don't see why you'd stop. How many of these have you done?" A pause. "Blind dates." "Obligation meals," she corrected. "Where your family arranges something and you show up because it's easier than the phone call." Something moved behind his eyes. Carefully, he set his menu down. 4, he said. "Including today." "And how did the others go?" "Pleasantly." He said it the way someone says fine when they mean forgettable. Mia nodded slowly. "So you're used to women being on their best behavior for you?" "Most people are on their best behavior around me, yes." "Because of the money." He didn't flinch. She'd half expected him to. "Partly," he said. "Partly the position." "Does it bother you?" Another pause. Longer this time. She noticed he did that, took the question seriously before answering, like he was checking the weight of his words before setting them down. "I've stopped noticing it," he said finally. "That's sad," Mia said simply. The table went quiet. Jun-ho looked at her, not offended, not cold. Something more complicated than either. Like a man who just heard a sound in a room he thought was empty. "I suppose it is," he said. And that was the moment Mia realized her plan had a flaw. The flaw was that Jun-ho Kong wasn't what she'd prepared for. She'd walked in ready for ego, the assumption of charm, the smooth confidence of a man who knew his own market value. She'd been prepared to deflect that. She knew how to be unimpressed by performance. She had not prepared for quiet. For the way he actually listened when she spoke, tracking her words with an attention that felt almost uncomfortable. For the way he hadn't once tried to redirect the conversation toward himself. For the fact that when she said something that landed, he didn't laugh immediately. He'd let it settle first, like he was making sure it was real before responding to it. She needed to recalibrate. The appetizers arrived. Some architectural arrangement of scallops and foam that looked like modern art and tasted, Mia admitted internally, extraordinary. "This is excessive," she said out loud. "The scallops. The whole thing." She gestured vaguely at the room. "The water menu. The foam. The fact that the fork is warmer than my apartment." She pointed at him with her appetizer fork. "Do you actually enjoy this? Or is this just where you take people to signal things?" Jun-ho studied her. "What would I be signaling?" "That you're important." That this meeting matters. That you're someone worth impressing. She ate a scallop. You don't need a 2-star restaurant for that. You could have that conversation at a diner. I could, he agreed. But people rarely say what they actually think at diners. I say what I think everywhere, Mia said. I've noticed. Does it bother you? He looked at her with something that was almost warmth. No, he said. Quietly. Like a confession. It doesn't. Mia looked away first. That was new. She was usually the one who made other people look away first. She picked up her water glass and bought herself 3 seconds. Okay, she thought. Okay, he's interesting. That doesn't mean anything. Interesting is not a reason. She had a whole internal list of reasons this was a dead end before it started. He was a billionaire and she was a nurse who budgeted her groceries. He probably had homes in 3 countries. She had Gerald, the ceiling water stain. He operated in a world where her entire annual salary was a rounding error. She set her glass down and made a decision. Your tie looks like something you'd wear to a very expensive funeral, she said. Jun-ho blinked. The pattern, she continued, gesturing at it. Very somber. Very I'm here to read the will. Did someone pick that for you? A beat of absolute silence. My assistant, he said slowly. Fire him. It's a her. Reassign her. Mia leaned back. Somewhere she can't reach your wardrobe. Jun-ho looked down at his tie. It was a navy brioni with a subtle geometric pattern that had cost more than Mia's monthly rent. He looked back up at her. And then, quietly, privately, in a way that seemed to surprise even him, the corner of his mouth moved. Not a smile. The ghost of a smile. Like a man who'd forgotten he knew how. Mia felt it in her sternum and immediately resented it. No, she told herself firmly. She'd come here to be unpleasant enough that he'd politely decline a second meeting. She had not come here to find a man with a quiet, almost smile that did something unreasonable to her chest. That was not the plan. That was the opposite of the plan. She tried a different angle. Do you always let people talk to you like this? She asked. The subtext was clear. Why haven't you left? Jun-ho understood the subtext. She could tell. No, he said simply. Then why? Because everyone else doesn't. He said it without drama, without performance. Just a fact, set on the table between them like the breadbasket. Everyone else is very careful with me. Very considered. They say the right thing, at the right time, in the right tone. He straightened his funeral tie slightly. You told me it looks like grief within 4 minutes of meeting me. It does, though. It does, he agreed. And there it was again, that ghost of something real. I haven't decided if it's refreshing or alarming. Probably both, Mia said. Probably both, he echoed. The entrees arrived. Mia looked at her pan-seared duck and thought, this is genuinely the best thing I've seen all week, and hated that she was enjoying herself. Across the table, Jun-ho Kong was doing something he hadn't done in a long time at one of these meals. He was present. Not managing the conversation, not calculating the exit, not half thinking about the Thursday acquisition meeting. He was here in this chair, watching this woman eat duck with the focused pleasure of someone who refused to pretend the food wasn't extraordinary, and saying exactly what she thought about everything. His tie, the foam appetizer, the water menu, the entire theater of wealth she was sitting inside, without cruelty, without agenda. Just truth. Casual, unfiltered, slightly rude truth. He had not felt this awake in months. That recognition landed somewhere uncomfortable. He picked up his wine glass and looked past her, out the tall window toward the gray Chicago skyline. He'd moved here from New York 8 months ago for the acquisition portfolio. He had a penthouse in River North, a driver, a team of 22. He worked 14 hours a day because the alternative was a silence in his personal life that had become, over the years, very loud. He looked back at Mia. She was frowning slightly at her plate, moving something around with her fork, completely unbothered by the silence that had settled between them, not filling it, not performing comfort. Just existing in it, easy and uncalculated. When did I last have a conversation where no one was performing? He thought. He couldn't remember. You're staring, Mia said without looking up. I'm thinking. About. He considered. When I last had a meal where I said something true. Mia looked up then. Something in her face shifted, barely, a softening at the edges, quickly recovered. That's a sad answer, she said. You said that already. About the other thing. Because it keeps being true. The ghost smile again. Fuller this time. Still not a real smile, something more careful, more earned. Like it had to work its way through years of careful stillness to get to his face. Mia looked back at her plate. Her chest did the thing again. She pressed her fork down harder than necessary. Absolutely not, she told herself. He is a billionaire CEO, and you have a ceiling stain named Gerald, and this is not your world, and you are not doing this. She put her fork down. Sat up straight. Looked at him directly, the way she looked at difficult patients, or difficult truths. I want to be honest with you, she said. You've been nothing but. I came here today planning to be unpleasant enough that you wouldn't want a second meeting. The table went very still. Jun-ho looked at her without blinking. I know, he said. Mia blinked. You. I could tell within the first 5 minutes. He said it without accusation. The water menu comment. The fork observation. The funeral tie. A pause. You were building a case for my disinterest. The heat that moved up Mia's neck was entirely unwelcome. And you just stayed? You were the most interesting person I'd spoken to in months. He said it simply, plainly, with the same weight he gave every word. Leaving seemed wasteful. Mia opened her mouth. Closed it. That was possibly the most straightforwardly honest thing anyone had said to her in 2 years, delivered with zero performance and zero expectation of a response. Just, true. Set down gently. No agenda. She hated how much it landed. This is a problem, she said quietly. Mostly to herself. Jun-ho tilted his head slightly. Why? Because I was supposed to leave here certain this was a mistake. And instead. She looked at him, this too quiet, too composed man in a funeral tie who laughed like he'd almost forgotten how, who listened like it was a skill he'd had to relearn, who just admitted out loud that her planned rudeness was the most real thing he'd encountered in months. Instead, she said carefully, I'm still here. The word hung between them like something fragile. Outside the window, Chicago moved, gray and indifferent and enormous. Inside Oriole, 2 people who had walked in with exit strategies sat very still, neither one reaching for them. The dessert menu arrived. Neither of them picked it up. Mia made it exactly 4 days without thinking about him. That was a lie. She made it 4 hours. She was back on shift at Northwestern Memorial by 6 the next morning, feet moving on autopilot through the cardiac unit hallway, clipboard in hand, coffee going cold in her other hand the way it always did because there was never actually time to drink it. The unit was loud in the specific way hospitals are loud, not chaotic, just relentlessly occupied. Monitors, footsteps, the low murmur of a television in room 14 where Mr. Okafor watched the morning news with the volume slightly too high because he refused to admit he needed a hearing aid. Mia checked his chart. Adjusted his 4. Told him the Bears were going to disappoint him again this season. You don't know that, Mr. Okafor said, offended. I know that, Mia said, already moving to the next room. This was her world. This was real. For lines and clipboards and shoes that her feet had stopped forgiving her for 3 years ago. This was where she made sense, useful, competent, needed in ways that were concrete and measurable. A patient's blood pressure came down. A family got good news. A scared 22-year-old getting her first cardiac workup got a nurse who sat on the edge of her bed for 4 minutes and explained everything slowly until the panic left her eyes. This was what Mia was good at. This was enough. She did not think about quiet men with ghost smiles and honest answers. She thought about him constantly. By Wednesday she'd replayed the lunch 3 times in the shower, not romantically, she told herself, analytically. She was processing. Identifying the tactical errors. She'd gone in with a plan, and the plan had failed because she hadn't accounted for the variable of him actually being a real person. That was on her. Noted. Corrected. By Thursday she'd told her best friend Keisha about it. This was a mistake. They were in Keisha's kitchen, takeout containers open on the counter, Keisha sitting cross-legged on the counter itself because she'd never once in her life used a chair correctly. Mia had kept the story brief and clinical. Blind date. Korean CEO. Didn't go as planned. It's fine. Keisha had listened to all of it with the focused attention of someone collecting evidence. "So he knew you were trying to get rid of him," Keisha said. "Yes." "And stayed anyway." "Yes." "And then told you to your face that you were the most interesting person he'd talked to in months." "That's what he said." Keisha pointed a chopstick at her. "Mia. Don't. Mia." "Keisha, I'm serious. Do not make this into a..." "He sounds incredible. He's a billionaire who lives in a penthouse and has a driver and probably owns things I've never heard of." So, Mia stopped. Pulled at a thread on her sleeve. "So that's not a world I belong in. And I'm not interested in finding out what it feels like to almost belong somewhere and then get reminded that I don't." Keisha was quiet for a moment. She knew about Derek. She'd been there for the aftermath. The 2 weeks of Mia working double shifts to avoid her own apartment, the slow reconstruction of her walls, taller this time, better insulated. She set the chopstick down. "Not every man is Derek," she said carefully. "I know that. Do you?" Mia closed the takeout container. "It doesn't matter. He's not going to call. These things don't go anywhere. We had one lunch and I insulted his tie, and that's a story, not a beginning." Her phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. Chicago area code. Mia stared at it. Keisha stared at her. The phone buzzed again, a text this time. "This is June Ho. I got your number from the contact your aunt provided. I want to be transparent about that rather than pretend it appeared naturally. I'd like to have dinner. Not an obligation meal. If you're not interested, you don't have to respond. JK." Mia read it twice. Then once more. "Who is it?" Keisha said, reading her face. Mia turned the phone around. Keisha read it. Looked up. "Read it again." "He signed it JK, she whispered. "Like a professional." Mia. "He texted like a professional." "That's not a selling point." "It's absolutely a selling point." "He disclosed where he got my number, Keisha." "Who does that?" "Someone with integrity. Or someone who's very calculated about appearing to have integrity." "Oh my God," Keisha grabbed the counter. "You are going to talk yourself out of something real because you're scared and I will not allow it." Mia took her phone back. "Read the text one more time." "Not an obligation meal." The specificity of that. He'd remembered exactly the phrase she'd used. Not an obligation meal. He'd held onto it, turned it over, used it deliberately. She put her phone face down on the counter. "I need to think," she said. "You need to say yes," Keisha said. Mia went home and didn't reply for 2 days. June Ho did not follow up. He'd sent the text and then, with the same discipline he applied to every professional decision, he had waited. No second message. No read receipt anxiety. He'd made his position clear and transparent, and the next move was hers entirely. He respected that boundary the way he respected contract terms, completely, without exception. What he did not do was stop noticing her absence. It was an unfamiliar sensation. He was not generally a man who noticed absences. His life had been constructed, efficiently, deliberately, to be self-contained. His work was consuming in the best way, his routine was tight, his social obligations were manageable and mostly professional. He had colleagues he respected and a small circle of people from Seoul he spoke to occasionally. He did not have gaps. And yet, Friday afternoon mid-meeting, someone on his acquisitions team made a point using entirely unnecessary jargon, the kind of polished, important-sounding language that meant exactly nothing, and June Ho's first involuntary thought was, Mia would say something about this. He didn't know what she'd say. Something sharp. Something that would puncture the pretension in one clean sentence and then move on without drama, because that was how she operated. She didn't linger in the cut. She just told the truth and let it land and kept eating her bread. He realized he was smiling faintly at a quarterly projection chart. David, his assistant, noticed. David had been with him for 4 years and had seen him smile at a chart exactly 0 times. He said nothing. He wrote something in his notepad. June Ho straightened. Returned to the meeting. Pushed it down. But the gap was still there. Mia replied on Saturday morning. 7:43 a.m. She'd just come off a night shift and was standing at her kitchen counter still in her scrubs, eating cereal dry because she'd forgotten to buy milk, and she picked up her phone and typed before the sensible part of her brain could organize a committee to stop her. One dinner. I'm not dressing up. And I'm telling you now, I will probably say something rude about the restaurant. 3 minutes passed. I would be disappointed if you didn't. JK. Mia looked at her dry cereal. Looked at Gerald on the ceiling. Don't, she told Gerald. Gerald said nothing, which was the most honest response anyone had given her all week. He chose a place called Wherewithal, a small seasonal restaurant in Avondale, nothing like Oriole. Intimate, warm, the kind of place with mismatched chairs and a chalkboard menu that changed based on what the farmers had delivered that week. 12 tables. No water menu. The kind of restaurant that suggested he'd actually thought about what she'd said instead of defaulting to what he knew. Mia stood outside it for 30 seconds before going in. He was already there. Of course he was. She had a feeling he was always early, that punctuality was one of the small private ways he showed respect. He stood when she approached the table. Not performatively. Just stood. Old habit, maybe, or genuine instinct. No tie, she said, looking at his open collar shirt. I took your advice, he said. I told you to fire your assistant, not dress yourself. I dressed myself. I can tell. He looked down at his shirt. Is it? It's fine. It's actually fine. She sat down. That was almost a compliment. Don't get used to it. He sat. The ghost smile arrived faster this time, less careful, like it had started to learn the way. And Mia Collins, who had come here with her walls at full height, felt them shift, just slightly, just at the foundation, and told herself it was nothing. It was not nothing. The dinner was easy in a way that scared her. Not the performance of ease, actual ease, the kind that sneaks up on you when you're not monitoring for it. They talked about her job, not politely, actually. He asked questions that weren't generic, not what's it like being a nurse, but what's the hardest part that nobody talks about. She told him about compassion fatigue, about the specific exhaustion of caring for people in their worst moments and then going home and having nobody to debrief with. About how she'd gotten very good at putting herself last and called it professionalism. He listened the way he did everything, completely without interrupting, with a kind of focused attention that felt both rare and slightly unnerving. You do the same thing, she said suddenly, reading something in his face. He looked up. Which thing? Put yourself last. Call it something that sounds functional. She tilted her head. Efficiency. Professionalism. Discipline. She watched his expression. What do you do with the quiet? When the meetings end and the building empties out. A pause. Longer than his others. Work more, he said. Yeah, Mia said softly. I figured. Something passed between them, not romantic, not yet. Quieter than that. Recognition. The specific, slightly painful recognition of seeing your own damage in someone else's architecture, both of you too smart not to notice and too practiced at avoidance to say it plainly. Mia looked at her food. Her heart was doing something she hadn't authorized. This is where it gets dangerous, she thought. Not the chemistry. Not the Thai comments. This right here, where it stops being amusing and starts being real. She looked up at him. He was already looking at her. I should tell you something, she said. All right. I'm not good at this. She said it plainly, the way she said everything. Not bad dates. I'm fine at bad dates. I mean, she searched for the word. Allowing things. Letting something become more than it's supposed to be. She pressed her thumbnail against the edge of the table. I got hurt. Not recently, but enough. And I rebuilt myself in a way that's very functional and very protected, and I'm good at it. She met his eyes. I'm telling you because you've been honest with me, and that seems fair. Junho was quiet for a moment. Then, I appreciate that. I'm not saying it to push you away this time, she clarified. I'm saying it because, she exhaled. Because this dinner is not what I expected, and I think you should know what you're working with. What I'm working with, he repeated slowly. Something in his eyes shifted, warm and careful, like handling something he didn't want to drop. Mia. He said her name with 2 clean syllables and full attention. I'm not going to pretend I know where this goes. I'm not going to promise things that aren't mine to promise yet. He straightened slightly, the composed stillness settling around him like a second suit. But I haven't wanted to know where something goes in a very long time. A pause. That feels significant. Mia's walls did the thing again. The foundation shift. She looked at him across the small table in the mismatched chair restaurant he'd chosen because he'd listened to what she said, and she thought, I am in so much trouble. Outside, Chicago had started to rain, the kind of soft, persistent rain that doesn't announce itself, just quietly soaks everything through. Mia didn't notice until they were leaving and the pavement was already dark and shining, and Jun-ho, without ceremony, moved slightly to her side so the overhang covered her more than him. She noticed that. She didn't say anything about it. But she noticed. Two people who built their whole lives around not needing anyone, and now neither one of them can stop showing up. Like this video, subscribe, and comment. You're not watching alone. None of us who've ever been afraid of something real are watching alone. It started with a phone call she wasn't supposed to take. 3 weeks after the Avondale dinner, 3 weeks of texts that started professionally and slowly stopped being professional, of Jun-ho sending her an article about compassion fatigue in emergency nursing with no comment attached except thought you'd find this relevant, JK. Of Mia responding with a photo of a genuinely terrible tie she'd spotted on a mannequin in a Michigan Avenue window display captioned Your assistant's influence is spreading. 3 weeks of that careful, cautious, unspoken thing building between them. They were at the Art Institute. Mia's idea. She'd thrown it out almost as a test, not a restaurant, not anywhere that costs money to breathe in, and he'd said Sunday at 2 without hesitation. They were standing in front of Georges Seurat's Sunday on La Grande Jatte, the enormous pointillist painting that took up most of the wall, all those tiny dots assembling themselves into a whole world from a distance, when her phone rang. She glanced at it. Her jaw tightened. Mom. She let it ring. Jun-ho, who noticed everything, said nothing. It rang again 30 seconds later. I have to take this, Mia said. I'm sorry, give me 2 minutes. She stepped into the corridor, and Jun-ho turned back to the painting, giving her privacy without being asked. He stood with his hands loosely behind his back and studied the way Seurat had built an entire afternoon out of nothing but small deliberate points of color. Up close it was almost abstract. Just marks, just dots, no clear meaning. You had to step back to see the whole thing. From the corridor, he heard fragments. Not words, just tone. Mia's voice, which was usually so level and certain, doing something different. Tighter. Careful in a way that was different from her usual careful. Like someone navigating a room in the dark, knowing exactly where the furniture was because they'd bruised themselves on it before. She came back 2 minutes and 40 seconds later. He didn't look at his watch, he just knew. Sorry, she said. Don't apologize. She stood beside him and looked at the painting. Her arms were crossed now, not angry, just contained. Self-held. My mom, she said. Not explaining. Just identifying. You don't have to. She calls when she needs something. Mia's voice was even. Practiced. Not often. But when she does, it's always structured the same way. Some version of I've been thinking about you that takes about 4 minutes to arrive at whatever the actual ask is. She paused. Today it was money. $200 for a bill she didn't specify. Jun-ho said nothing. He waited. I sent it, Mia said. I always send it. She exhaled, not dramatically, just the specific exhale of someone releasing something they've been holding in their chest. And she'll call again in 2 or 3 months and I'll send that too. A beat. We don't have the kind of relationship where I can say no. We don't really have a relationship at all. Just this, she moved her hand slightly. Transaction. Dressed up in almost warmth. She stopped. Looked sideways at him. I don't know why I told you that. Because it's true, Jun-ho said quietly. And you default to truth. Something in her face shifted. Not breaking, more like a seam, slightly loosened. She wasn't around much when I was growing up, Mia said. Quieter now. They both drifted slightly, moving along the painting without deciding to, the way you do in museums when a conversation gets real and walking feels easier than standing still. My aunt, Patrice, the one who arranged, a small dry smile. All of this, she raised me mostly. From 12 onward. She glanced at him. So when people tell me Patrice is a lot, I don't have the heart to agree. She's a lot in the way that people are a lot when they showed up. Jun-ho listened. He was extraordinarily good at listening, not the performative kind, not the kind where someone waits for a gap to insert themselves. The kind where you could feel the attention, solid and unhurried, like something you could lean against. Patrice is why I'm a nurse, Mia continued. She was a CNA for 22 years. I followed her to work once when I was 14 because school was cancelled and she had no one to watch me. Spent the day in a long-term care facility watching her talk to a 91-year-old woman named who had no family left. She paused. Patrice held Dot's hand for 20 minutes on her lunch break. Just sat there. Held her hand. Her voice went quiet. I went home and told her I wanted to do that. She said, then do it, baby. The world needs more people who know how to stay. She stopped walking. Jun-ho stopped beside her. The world needs more people who know how to stay. He looked at the painting for a moment. All those small, patient dots. All that deliberate color. My father, he said. He said it the way you say something you've been carrying a long time. Not dramatically, just carefully, like setting something fragile on a surface you're not sure will hold it. He built Kong Capital. 30 years. From a single trading firm in Seoul to what it is now. He paused. He died 18 months ago. Mia turned to look at him. Cardiac event, Jun-ho said. Very fast. He was at his desk. Something moved across his face, controlled, but present. I was in New York. I got on a plane and by the time I landed, there was nothing. He stopped. Recalibrated. There was nothing left to do. The corridor was quiet around them. Somewhere in the next gallery, a child asked their parent something in a loud whisper. I moved the Chicago office 8 months ago because I couldn't be in New York anymore, Jun-ho said. The city had too much of him in it. Places we'd worked together. A restaurant in Midtown where we had lunch every time he visited. A pause. I thought distance would be practical. Was it? No. He said it plainly. You can't relocate grief. It follows. Mia was quiet for a moment. Then, what was he like? No one had asked him that. In 18 months, condolences, business continuity meetings, estate proceedings, his mother's practical grief that expressed itself in reorganizing and moving forward, no one had simply asked him what his father was like. He felt the question land somewhere unguarded. Demanding, Jun-ho said. In the way that people are demanding when they believe in your capacity beyond what you currently believe in yourself. He looked at the painting. He had very high expectations and almost no patience for excuses. He also called me every Sunday morning. Not for business. Just, he paused. Just to talk. About nothing important. Baseball scores. Weather. A book he'd read. His voice was even, but the evenness was costing him something. I haven't known what to do with Sunday mornings since. The silence that followed was the softest silence Mia had ever heard. Without thinking, before the sensible committee in her brain could convene, she reached over and touched his hand. Not a grab, not a hold. Just her fingers against the back of his hand for 3 seconds. I hear you. I'm here. You're not alone with that. He looked down at her hand. Then up at her. She pulled it back. Cleared her throat. Sorry. Don't, he said. Quietly. Firmly. Don't apologize for that. They stood for a moment in the particular stillness of two people who have just crossed a line they both pretended wasn't there and are now standing on the other side of it, slightly exposed, neither one retreating. Tell me about Derek, Jun-ho said. Mia blinked. How do you know? You've referenced being hurt. Someone specific. The way you hold yourself when the subject gets close. He looked at her directly. You don't have to. But I'd like to know. Mia looked at the painting. All those Sunday people on the riverbank, assembled from tiny careful marks, each one separate, each one part of something larger. We were together for 2 years, she said. I thought we were. I thought it was real. I introduced him to Patrice. I let myself be seen. She said the last part like it was the actual wound, not the betrayal, but the vulnerability that preceded it. Found out he'd been telling people I was casual. That I was, not someone he was serious about. She exhaled. I don't think he was malicious. I think he just never looked at me and thought she's it. And I'd been acting like he had. She turned to look at Jun-ho. I decided after that I would only be who I actually am, right from the start. No performance. No softening. If someone can't handle me unfiltered, she gestured loosely, then we find out early and everyone saves time. The funeral tie strategy, Jun-ho said. Mia laughed, a real one, sudden and unguarded, and then looked slightly startled by it, like she hadn't heard it coming. Jun-ho watched it happen. The laugh, then the startlement. He felt something in his chest, specific, unmistakable, the thing he'd been carefully not naming for 3 weeks. I want to tell you something, he said. All right. I've been careful, he said slowly. My whole life, I've been careful. Careful with decisions, with words, with what I allow to matter. He looked at her. My father used to say that I treated my own life like an acquisition, that I'd analyze it rather than live it. A pause. I thought he was wrong. I'm less certain of that now. What changed? Mia asked. A woman walked into a restaurant and told me my tie looked like grief, he said. And instead of being offended, I felt, he searched for it. Present. For the first time in a long time, I was completely present. Mia looked at him. The careful, composed man in the Art Institute corridor, carrying his father on Sunday mornings, moving cities to outrun silence, running a company built from someone else's love and his own relentless discipline. The ghost smile that wasn't a ghost anymore, slower to arrive, but more real when it got there. She thought about walls. About how you build them for protection, and then one day you realize you've also built yourself in. I'm scared of you, she said. Honest. Clean. I know, he said. I'm scared of this too. That's not comforting. I know that also. The smile arrived. Real this time, full and quiet and entirely his. But I'd rather be scared of something real than comfortable with nothing. Mia looked at him for a long moment. Then slowly, deliberately, without the armor, she smiled back. Not the dry, deflecting smile she used as a tool. Something softer. Something she hadn't let anyone see in 2 years. Jun-ho saw it. He held it carefully, like the fragile thing it was. They left the museum side by side into the gray Chicago afternoon, and somewhere between the revolving door and the bottom of the front steps, their hands found each other without discussion, without announcement, fingers loosely interlaced, both of them looking straight ahead, neither one acknowledging it. Both of them holding on. 2 broken people who finally stopped pretending, and chose to be seen instead. If this moment got you, if you've ever let someone in after swearing you wouldn't, like this video, subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. This story is for everyone who's ever been afraid and stayed anyway. It was Keisha who saw the article first. She sent it at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday with no message attached. Just the link, which meant it was either very good or very bad, and the fact that she'd sent it before 7 a.m. meant it was bad. Mia was on her break at the hospital, sitting in the small staff lounge with her actual hot coffee. She'd been making time for hot coffee lately, a small new discipline she hadn't examined too closely, when she opened it. The headline was from a Chicago society blog Mia had never heard of and would have continued happily never hearing of. Kong Capital Air's mystery woman. Who is the nurse dating Chicago's most eligible bachelor? There was a photo. Taken outside wherewithal after their second dinner. She hadn't noticed anyone, hadn't thought to notice anyone, because that was not a world she'd ever had to think about. In it, she and Jun-ho were walking toward his car, and she was saying something and he was looking at her with the expression she'd only recently learned to recognize. That full, quiet attention that meant she had all of him. It was a good photo in the worst possible way. It told the whole story in one frame. The article was short but efficient. Her name, her workplace, her neighborhood, all pulled from what she could only assume was not very hard public searching. A quote from an unnamed source describing Jun-ho as uncharacteristically distracted lately. A closing line that asked, with the studied lightness of something designed to wound, is Chicago's most powerful CEO really trading boardrooms for bedpans? Mia read it twice. Then she put her phone face down on the table, drank her coffee, and finished her shift. She did not text Jun-ho. He called at noon. She let it go to voicemail. He texted immediately after, "I've seen it. I'm sorry. Can we talk tonight?" She read it and didn't reply. This was the thing about walls, even ones you'd started to take down brick by careful brick. The moment something hit, The muscle memory was instant. Seal it. Contain it. Get small before someone makes you feel small first. The article wasn't devastating in any objective sense. She knew that. She was a grown woman with a career and a life, and she'd been called worse than a punchline. But it wasn't the article, it was what the article represented. The world he actually lived in. The world that had looked at her, at them, and its first instinct was to find the joke. Trading boardrooms for bedpans. She was the joke. She'd been here before, not in the tabloid sense, but in the essential sense. The person someone chose in private but couldn't quite stand behind in public. The person who was enough in a small warm restaurant but not quite enough when the lights got bright. She'd sworn after Derek she would never be that person again. By the time her shift ended she had 11 texts from Keisha, 3 from Aunt Patrice who had somehow already seen it and was equal parts outraged and thrilled, and 4 missed calls from Junho. She went home. Changed out of her scrubs. Stood in her kitchen and looked at Gerald. "Don't say anything," she told Gerald. Gerald, for once, felt insufficient. Her phone rang again. Junho. She picked up before she'd decided to. "Mia." His voice was different, the composure still there, but underneath it something tight and urgent. "I need you to know that no one from my office." "I know," she said. Her voice came out flat. She hadn't meant it to. A pause. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're doing the voice." "I don't have a voice." "You do. It's the one where everything is very level because you're holding something down." He paused. "Talk to me." Mia sat down on her couch. The apartment was quiet. The plants on the windowsill needed water, and she hadn't noticed until right now. "I'm not angry at you," she said carefully. "I want to be clear about that." "Then what?" She pressed her thumb against her knee. How to say this? How to say the real thing without dressing it up or weaponizing it? "That article reminded me of something I'd started to forget," she said. "That we come from very different places. And that the place you come from has opinions about who belongs in it." The article was written by. "I know who wrote it. It doesn't matter who wrote it." She exhaled. "Junho. You have a driver and a penthouse and a company your father built and people who watch who you walk to your car with. I have a 1-bedroom apartment and a ceiling stain and a job. Where I work nights and eat vending machine granola bars." She said it plainly, without self-pity, just geography. "Those aren't complaints. I love my life. But they're facts. And I think maybe we've been, in these small warm private spaces, and I've been letting myself forget the facts." Silence on the line. Long enough that she checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. "Can I come over?" he said. Mia blinked. "What?" "I'd like to have this conversation in person." A pause. "If you'll let me." Junho. "You don't have to let me. But I'm asking." She looked at the plants. The ceiling. The quiet apartment she'd built into a life she was proud of. The life she'd been living before that was enough. Functional, protected, enough. She thought about the Art Institute. His hand under hers for 3 seconds. "Don't apologize for that. I'll text you the address," she said. He arrived in 20 minutes without the driver. She noted that when she heard him take the stairs rather than call up from the lobby the way she'd half expected, some image she'd had of how his world operated dissolving quietly. He knocked twice. She opened the door and he was standing in the hallway in a dark jacket, no tie, and the expression of a man who had rehearsed nothing and intended to say everything. She stepped back to let him in. He came in and looked at the apartment, really looked, the way he did everything, taking it in fully. The plants. The nursing textbooks. The self-help books with unbroken spines. The half-finished mug on the counter. Gerald on the ceiling. "What's the stain's name?" he said. Mia stared at him. "How did you?" "It has the energy of something that's been named." "Gerald," she said, after a moment. Something moved through Junho's face, warm and specific and entirely real. He looked at Gerald for one more second, and then he turned to face her and the almost smile was gone, replaced by something more open than she'd ever seen on him. Something that had set down its composure at the door. "I need to say something," he said. "And I need you to let me finish before you build anything." Mia crossed her arms. Then, consciously, uncrossed them. Okay. The article was written by someone who profits from reducing people to a punchline. It was cruel and reductive, and I am genuinely sorry that this, he gestured between them, put you in its path. He held her gaze. But I want to be honest with you, because that's the only thing that's ever worked between us. He took a breath. I don't care about that world. I need you to understand that, not as reassurance, as fact. That world, the society pages, the opinions, the who belongs where, I have spent my entire adult life operating inside it and feeling nothing in it. He paused. You are the first thing in 18 months that has made me feel something. Not the dinner, not the restaurant. You. Your honesty and your rudeness and the way you held my hand for 3 seconds and then apologized for it. His jaw tightened slightly. I'm not going to let a blog article make you feel like a footnote. You are not a footnote to me. Mia's throat had done something complicated. She kept her face level. She started. I'm not finished. She stopped. I know you were hurt, he said. I know someone looked at you, really looked at you, and still chose not to stand behind you. And I know that I cannot promise I'll do everything right because I won't. I've spent 34 years being better at work than at people. He held her gaze steady. But I have not once, in 8 weeks, looked at you and thought anything except that you are exactly who I want to be in a room with. He paused. Every version of you. The rude one in the first 5 minutes. The one who holds the hand and apologizes for it. The one who names the ceiling stain. His voice dropped slightly. I'm not asking you to forget that you got hurt. I'm asking you to let me be someone who doesn't do that to you. The apartment was very quiet. Mia looked at him, this composed, careful, quietly broken man who had driven himself here, walked up her stairs, named her ceiling stain, and just said more honest, true things in 4 minutes than most people managed in years. Her walls didn't shatter. That's not how walls work. But something at the center of them went still, the constant vigilant tension of maintenance, the exhausting work of keeping everything reinforced, and in that stillness was something that felt dangerously, terrifyingly like peace. You're not going to stop being a billionaire, she said. Her voice was slightly unsteady. She kept going. There's still going to be your world and the opinions in it, and dinners I don't know how to dress for. You dressed fine every time. Jun-ho. I'll teach you what's useful and ignore the rest, he said. And you can continue to tell me when my choices look like grief. A sound escaped Mia, not quite a laugh, not quite a sob, something embarrassingly in between. She pressed the back of her hand to her mouth. He crossed the room. Not fast. He'd never been someone who moved fast toward anything, she'd learned. He moved like every step was chosen. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head slightly to hold his gaze, and he reached up and very gently moved her hand away from her mouth. Held it, both of her hands in both of his, the same way she touched his hand in the museum corridor. I hear you. I'm here. You're not alone with that. I would very much like to be with you, he said quietly. Not carefully. Not as an experiment. Actually. He held her gaze. But only if you want that too. Mia looked at their hands. His steady. Hers shaking slightly, the honest answer her voice hadn't given yet. I'm going to say something rude to you at least once a week, she said. I'm counting on it. And I'm not moving out of this apartment. I wouldn't ask you to. Gerald stays. Gerald is structural at this point. He glanced up at the stain. He's earned it. Mia laughed, fully this time, real and unguarded, and she didn't look startled by it. She let it happen. She felt him watch it happen, holding it with the same careful attention he gave everything she did. She looked back at him. Okay, she said. Quiet. Certain. Okay, he said. He didn't lean in dramatically. He rested his forehead against hers, gentle, unhurried, like a man who had all the time in the world now that he'd found somewhere worth being. Her eyes closed. She felt his thumbs move against her hands, slow, steady, and the last of the vigilance in her chest released, like a breath held for 2 years finally let go. Outside, Chicago moved the way Chicago always moved, enormous and indifferent and completely unaware that in a small North Side apartment, 2 people who'd built entire lives around not needing anyone had just quietly decided to need each other. The plants needed water. Gerald presided from the ceiling, entirely unbothered. Mia Collins, who had walked into a restaurant 6 weeks ago with an exit strategy and a talent for endings, stood in her kitchen with her forehead against a billionaire's and felt, for the first time in longer than she wanted to admit, like something was beginning. Not a beginning she could control or schedule or protect herself from. Just a beginning. Real and slightly terrifying and completely, entirely hers. Please like this video, subscribe, and drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from and which moment broke you.